Wishing everyone a happy holiday, upcoming holiday. Okay, so I'll just dive right in. So we're now just 2 days away from Shavuot, when after 7 weeks of traveling in the desert, following the exodus from Egypt, the Israelites reached Mount Sinai and received the Torah. I want to take a look at something really specific from the Israelites' journey in the desert and offer what I think is a fun hypothetical halachic analysis. So during their time in the desert, the Israelites were sustained by God with the manna from the heavens, the man. Once Shavuot arrived, the Israelites accepted the Torah and thereby became Torah-bound Jewish nation. So at this point, the question seems it's perfectly fitting for this moment of receiving the Torah to ask this question after all this time they've already partaken of the man, but now are Torah Jews. What blessing do they say on the manna? That's the question I want to look at. Kind of a hypothetical halachic analysis I want to do with you right now. Okay, so first let's look at the Torah text. So referring to the manna in Exodus, it says, "Vayir'u b'nei Yisrael vayomru ish el achiv manhu ki lo yadu mahu vayomer Moshe alehem hu halechem asher natan Hashem lachem la'ochla." When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "This is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat." I want to take a look again at that last part of the sentence, the last part of that verse. Vayomer Moshe alehem hu halechem asher natan Hashem lachem la'ochla. So they really knew nothing. He says, Moshe has to say, you really start with the basics. So he says, this is bread, God provided it, and you eat it. So certainly, they needed to be instructed in the proper blessing. But what was it? So I narrowed it down to 5 options. So we'll take a look at 5 options for what I think the blessing could have been on the manna. Option 1, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. This is probably the most familiar choice. It says in the Talmud, Amar Rav Nachman, Moshe takan liYisrael birchat hazan b'sha'ah she'yarad lahem man. Moshe instituted for Israel the first blessing of who feeds all when the manna descended for them. So if Moshe wrote the first bracha, the first blessing of Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals, because of the manna, presumably the blessing before eating would have corresponded to the blessing after eating, and thereby one could reason hamotzi lechem min haaretz was the fitting blessing before eating. So when we make hamotzi, we typically conclude the meal with Birkat HaMazon. This is supported by the Sforno, the 16th century Italian rabbi, who offers helpful commentary on this excerpt from Exodus that has to do with the manna. He suggests that the prohibition that the people were doing when they tried to collect the manna on Shabbos, which is something they were not supposed to do. They were supposed to collect the double portion on Erev Shabbat. What was the prohibition that they were doing? They were detaching something from the ground. So even though it was not grown from the earth and it has no roots, it was as if it was being taken from the ground. So therefore, even though the manna came from the heavens and not from the earth, the blessing of hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who brings forth bread from the earth, would still have been appropriate. Option 2, borei minei mizonot. Rabbi Chaim Pelagi suggests that this would be the answer, borei minei mizonot. That would have been the fitting bracha for the manna, because the manna tasted, he says, like wafers with honey. Such a food would typically receive the blessing of mizonot, the blessing that we say on cookies and cakes and the like. However, he adds, potentially since they were kovea seuda on it, meaning that they made a full meal on something that was mizonot, then they would still have to make hamotzi. So I think the mizonot option, it's no good. It doesn't work. Option 3, a novel, yet really quite beautiful suggestion by the famed 16th century Kabbalist, the Ramah Mifano, Rabbi Menachem Dafano. So picking up on this discussion in the tractate of Baba Batra in the Talmud, there's a discussion about the feast that will take place at the end of days. And the Ramah Mifano notices that this joyous feast that the Talmud is describing, that'll have the Leviathan, the Leviathan, the giant sea creature referenced in the Bible, as the main course, but there's no mention of any bread. So wouldn't such a holy, special, incredible meal really need to be a proper meal and have some kind of bread? So Ramah Mifano suggests that there is a jar of manna hidden away from the days in the desert, and this manna will be part of the seuda, of this meal. And what would be the bracha? The Rama Mifano says, Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim, who brings forth bread from the heavens. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the heavens. That would be the blessing according to this Kabbalist. That's our third suggestion. Okay, fourth suggestion, shehakol. Shehakol is a blessing that we say on things that don't grow directly from the earth and don't fit into any other categories of blessings, such as meat and fish, cheese, eggs, candy, drinks apart from wine, etc. I want to get back to option number 4 at the end. Option number 5, and then we'll do a little bit of explaining about the some of the halachot that are important for determining our final answer. But first, option number 5, no blessing at all. That's option number 5. So there's a story that Rabbi Tzvi Elimelech, who's the author of the Bnei Yissaschar, he was sitting at the table of his teacher, Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch. They were going back and forth about the proper blessing to be said on the Manna, as rabbis tend to do at their Shabbat tables. And Rabbi Tzvi Elimelech suggested the answer of the Rama Mifano, that it would be Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim, who brings forth bread from the heavens. The guests were unconvinced by this answer, and finally, a student at the table suggested that no blessing at all would be needed on the Manna. All the guests were shocked. Eating of Hashem's heavenly food, let alone any food at all, without a blessing? How could this be? He then further explained his position and really impressed his teachers and the guests there. When we recite blessings on food, we're releasing the divine sparks hidden within the mundane and thereby elevating the food, the physical food, to the realm of something spiritual. Therefore, when we eat, it is not just a satisfaction of a physical need, but a spiritual and sacred action. However, the manna was a divine food straight from the heavens, already deeply infused with sparks of godliness, and thus needed no further elevation. It says in the Talmud tractate dealing with blessings, it says, Asur lo le'adam she'hineh min ha'olam hazeh below bracha. It is forbidden to enjoy of this world without a bracha. But what the manna, was it really of this world? So maybe no blessing at all. That was option 5. So now we'll just take a quick detour into a little bit about the halachic, the legal matters that we're dealing with here, and determining the answer to this question. And then I want to circle back to our options and find some sort of conclusion. Okay, so it says in the Shulchan Aruch, our essential work on Jewish law, for all blessings on food, if one has a doubt as to whether or not he made a blessing, he shouldn't bless whether it is a blessing before or after, apart from Birkat HaMazon, because this is from the Torah. In other words, if you forget whether you said a blessing on something before or after eating, it is best not to say a blessing at all, because it would be worse if you said a redundant blessing, and this would be a bracha levatala. It would be a blessing in vain. However, for benching after meals, which is from the Torah, it's not rabbinic like other blessings, you would say it. This halacha is predicated on what is a guiding principle in halacha. While for cases of when we have doubt as to a biblical law, we're strict. For brachot, which are rabbinic in nature, we apply the principle of sveka derabanan lekula. We are lenient in cases of when we have a doubt as to a rabbinic law. So what does it mean to be lenient about blessings? Does it mean one should say it or should not say the blessing? The Magen Avraham, the 17th century Polish Talmudist, in commenting on a case of one responding on Maine when someone else said an unnecessary blessing, says that while there are some who argue an unnecessary blessing makes one liable for the biblical prohibition of do not take God's name in vain, most authorities say an unnecessary blessing is rather a prohibition. He explains that taking God's name in vain is not a Torah-level prohibition when in the context of a blessing. The Mishnah Brura, the late 19th, early 20th century work that has become the primary halachic source of Jewish living for Ashkenazi Jews, he says, if one does not know if he said hamotzi, when he continues to eat, he should not say the blessing because the blessing of hamotzi is only rabbinic, and therefore, for doubtful cases, we are lenient. And for this reason, even if he wants to be stringent and to bless, he is not allowed to do this because of the prohibition on unnecessary blessings. So one cannot be stringent upon himself and say the bracha anyway. If you have a doubt as to whether you made a blessing, you can't be overly pious and say, well, I can't possibly eat without a blessing. I better make another. No, it's not allowed here. The Mishnah Brura follows up and does offer a potential solution, however. He says, however, if there happens to be another person present who wants to eat bread, it is correct that he should exempt the other with his hamotzi blessing. So if you're not sure if you said hamotzi, but you're around someone else who needs to make hamotzi because they're about to eat bread, you can listen to their blessings, say amen, and all the bases will be covered through that. Okay, so if you have a doubt about whether a blessing is necessary at all, such as when you don't remember if you made a blessing, you don't say the blessing yourself, but rather try to be included in someone else's blessing if possible. That's our conclusion on that matter. But what about a situation when you certainly haven't made a blessing yet, and you don't know what blessing to make, like our situation with the manna? So now I want to circle back to option number 4, shehakol. The Chaye Adam, the 18th century work on Jewish law, says, on all things, including bread and wine, if one blesses shehakol, he has fulfilled his obligation. And therefore, if one is confused as to what is the appropriate blessing for something, after he has learned and is expert in the laws of blessings, but just because of a difference of opinion or the like, it was not made clear what is the fitting blessing for this thing, he should bless on this food shehakol. So here's my suggestion. Should we ever partake of this feast of Leviathan, of Leviathan and Manna? It is unclear what blessing to make on the Manna, regardless of how much one knows about the laws of blessings. No knowledge of that is gonna help you know for certain what is the appropriate blessing for Manna. Therefore, according to this position that we just saw, the Chaye Adam, we should make shehakol. We should make the blessing that covers everything. However, normally after eating something that's shehakol, we make the after blessing of brei nefashot. That would be typical of something that has the first blessing of shehakol. But here I think birkat hamazon, the benching after meals, would be more fitting. This is supported because remember that Talmud source that we saw that says Moses instituted the first blessing of birkat hamazon after receiving the manna. So we have a biblical source that seems to support that. And it's also supported by that source that we saw from the Shulchan Aruch that said that you still say birkat hamazon, the benching after meals, even in the case of doubt, because it is unique amongst the blessings for food in that it has its sources from the Torah. So I can't say for sure when it will be that we'll have to address such questions like this, such as how to properly thank God for a feast of heavenly bread and giant sea monster. But for the time being, this topic is purely hypothetical. However, I hope that this theoretical halacha is as interesting to some of you as it is to me. And more importantly, I pray that we should be blessed to come to a day where such questions are our greatest concern. I wish everyone good and healthy. Very happy Shavuot.
There was a question.
Did you say they would eat Leviathan in the feast? Surely not kosher. So that's a great question. I guess we don't really know exactly. I think some people say it would be like comparable to some kind of species of sperm whale, which you're correct, would not be kosher. We don't really know what this animal was precisely because it's just referenced in the Bible and is extinct, or we don't know exactly which species it is. But there is a source in the Talmud that mentions at the feast at the end of days, Leviathan will be a part of it. Whether or not at that point we'll have a different set of laws of kashrut, or whether this species actually is kosher and we never knew. I guess that would be revealed at that time. But it's a good question. Interesting.
I suppose we can assume it had fins and scales. Yeah.
I guess we don't know. It could have just been a giant kosher fish.
There's a nice picture of the Leviathan from I think Italy, in the Renaissance Italy. So they knew what it looks like, even if we didn't.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Phil.